Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
Office Bloke Daz.
Together we are the Office Blokes.
Yep, we are indeed.
We have a Patreon request that Office Bloke Mike is desperate to tell you all about. He's excited. It's exciting stuff, isn't it?
Overly excited. I need to calm down. This is for Droid C.
Cheers, Droid.
If you support
Cheers, Droid. Yep.
Brilliant. This is You're Wrong about the First Amendment.
Are we?
I think this is a legal video.
Who's wrong about the First Amendment? You or us?
Well, saying you're wrong, so saying we are. I don't think we are.
A bit of a blanket statement, that, isn't it?
What's the First Amendment?
Is it the right to free speech?
I don't want to spoil it for anyone, so I'd rather watch it. I could quote it in a word by word, but you know.
Let the legal eagle do it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Mike. Yeah, go for it.
Good swerve.
Yeah.
I think it might be the right to free speech.
Right, okay.
I think, or is that the Second Amendment? Or is that the one about guns? Ooh, I was definitely wrong about the first.
I plead the fifth.
Smooth. Right, let's check it out. We do like a bit of legal
We
on
do.
this channel. We've not done him for a bit though. You're wrong about the First Amendment. Let's do it.
I have a confession to make. I am a convicted felon. I once went to the movies and I saw fire on screen, and in my excitement, I yelled out, "Fire!" And the theater was crowded. I knew it was wrong. I knew I had no First Amendment right to say it.
We have you surrounded!
The police immediately came and arrested me under California's Anti-Fire in a Crowded Theater Statement Act of 1989. I spent 10,000 years in jail. But when I got out of jail, I was inspired to become the lawyer that I am today, to make sure that no one would ever commit the same First Amendment speech violations that I did in my younger days. Now, obviously, all of that is complete nonsense, but if you spent any time online, you might not know that. If I took a quick poll and asked you, what are you absolutely 100% not allowed to yell in a movie theater? Well, everybody knows the answer to that question, and almost everyone is wrong about that particular question. But don't worry, even the people in government, perhaps especially the people in government who should know better, do not know better. Let's check in with New York Governor Kathy Hochul.
Yeah, I'll protect the First Amendment any day of the week. But you don't protect hate speech. You don't protect incendiary speech. You're not allowed to scream fire in a crowded theater. There are limitations on speech.
Unfortunately, we are now all dumber for having watched that clip. The only thing that we've learned is that the governor of New York does not understand free speech at all. But luckily, I am fired up to explain how everyone keeps getting the First Amendment wrong. So let's get this party started. Now, obviously, everyone on the internet thinks you simply cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. Well, I am here to tell you that yes, you...
The internet's one of them funny places, isn't it? Where if you start a rumour, it becomes true very quickly.
Yeah.
It could spread so quickly, doesn't it? It could spread worldwide within minutes, can't it? It really can.
I think there's a thing we do as humans, and we confuse the law with our personal feelings about a particular topic. And you think, of course you can't shout fire in a crowded theatre.
Yeah.
But that's just your personal feelings about it, and I think the internet is just full of everyone's personal feelings about everything stated as fact.
All right, since the pandemic, everyone's become a doctor, haven't they? And a surgeon.
Absolutely,
and a medic, and a physician, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Clinical researcher, with hindsight behind you.
They've left the job as a landscape gardener to take up the role as chief correspondent on the pandemic, but.
The thing is, online as well, if someone says something a bit controversial, people will read it and think, oh, I didn't know that. And they say, did you? And then they'll say to friends, don't they? Say, did you know this?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. And then that's how things can
There's one that goes
spread on.
There's one that goes around where someone announces someone's dead every year. It's the same person.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it is now.
David Attenborough's one of them.
No, it's not David Attenborough. It's someone who's actually dead.
Oh, right, okay.
He died like 15 years ago. But it's one of them vague ones that you're not sure.
It was a dark trend for a while, though, fake announcing celebrities' deaths, wasn't it, on the internet?
Yeah.
It's bizarre. But yeah, it's a weird world where, I mean, I think we've all been guilty of it, where you read a headline and you don't click the article because the article's just going to be adverts and shit, and you can't
nothing to do with the headline.
Yeah, and it's nothing. And then you're in the pub sat with people and you go, did you know that whatever, and you just completely recite a headline that you heard.
You can generally yell fire in a crowded theater. Generally speaking, it's legal. Say it with me.
Yes, we can! Yes, we can!
Now, this First Amendment myth has a long history that simply will not die. And the origin of it comes from an opinion from none other than one of the most esteemed jurists in history, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. He wrote, quote, "The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic." And millions of Americans across the decades have decided that this means you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Justice Holmes never qualified that the theater had to be crowded. He simply said that shouting fire when there was no fire and causing a panic was not protected speech. So why did Holmes bother to say this? Were Americans in the early 1900s constantly pulling hilarious pranks in which they falsely claimed that theaters were on fire? No, not really, but deadly theater fires were common in that particular time. It was standard practice that due to lax regulation, when all of the seats in a theater were sold out, the owners would seat people in the aisles and stairways. Sets and props used to be made of extremely flammable materials.
That said hundreds died in theatre fire, didn't it, that article?
Yeah.
It took me a few seconds to process that. That's horrific.
Oh, some of these theatres are packed, aren't they? And if, like you say, that if he's sitting them in the aisles and stuff like that as well, and
just people panicking, jumping over each other,
using pyros that look real.
I think years ago that was the entertainment as well, was it? So these used to be a lot bigger as well.
Yep.
Wow.
There wasn't much ventilation, and theaters rarely marked exit doors. In 1903, at least 602 people died in a fire in Chicago's Iroquois Theater, which only had one entrance. Chicago building codes required separate staircases for every balcony, but the architects who designed the Iroquois ignored the rules, and instead, the theater just had one staircase so that everyone could see and be seen regardless of social class. And when the fire broke out, the building was completely full. Aisles and stairways were full of theatergoers. They ran over each other trying to get through the front doors. And the Iroquois Theater fire was not a unique event. There were so many deadly theater fires that people genuinely were afraid of crowded spaces. So all of this formed the background for when Justice Holmes wrote his famous opinion in the 1919 case of Schenck versus the United States. Now, you might be surprised, but the facts of the Schenck case bear no resemblance to a crowded theater full of fire-phobic patrons. Now, Charles Schenck was a socialist who attempted to distribute thousands of leaflets encouraging people to evade the World War I draft. The government charged him with violating the Espionage Act by conspiring to cause insubordination in the military and navy. The Supreme Court upheld Schenck's conviction and the constitutionality of the Espionage Act, finding that Congress could regulate speech that created, quote, a clear and present danger. Now, all Schenck did was send leaflets to recently conscripted soldiers suggesting that the draft was a form of involuntary servitude in violation of the 13th Amendment. And Justice Holmes wrote that the widespread dissemination of the leaflets was sufficiently likely to disrupt the conscription process. That was what gave rise to his so-called clear and present danger. Justice Holmes conceded that the letter may have been constitutionally protected in many places in ordinary times, but determined that the character of the writing, quote, depends upon the circumstances which it is done. Therefore, Holmes held, quote, the question in every case is whether the words used are used in such a circumstance and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger that will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent. And in so doing, he compared the leaflets to falsely shouting fire in a theater, provoking a panic, a type of speech that he thought could be regulated. Now, the clear and present danger test was favorable to the government, particularly during wartime, when the court gave the government wide leeway to restrict speech. But Justice Holmes realized his analysis in Schenck wasn't very good and was rife for abuse, and changed his mind within a year. In the case of Abrams versus United States, another case involving anti-war activists, the Supreme Court upheld convictions of Russian immigrants who were charged with violating the Sedition Act. This time, though, Holmes dissented from the majority. He advocated for a much more rigorous test, arguing that the government should only be able to punish speech if there was an imminent danger that it will bring about the substantive evils. But Schenck's clear and present danger test was eventually overruled 50 years later when the court replaced it with the imminent lawless action test, which protects a broad range of speech, though you might remember it from the Brandenburg incitement test, which, let's just say it's very relevant these days. So Holmes's analogy was not only imperfect, but it was dicta in the very case that created it, meaning it never had any force of law, and it was based out of a case that is simply no longer good law at all. And the problem with the fire in a crowded theater analogy, generally speaking, is that people think it stands for the proposition that you can regulate almost any bad speech. But it was a terrible analogy from the very inception, and it was used to regulate speech that was clearly protected. So, pop quiz, when could you yell fire in a crowded theater? Well, first of all, if there was an actual fire, you would be warning other people, so you're well within your rights to yell fire when there is a fire in a theater. Probably when you mistakenly, but in good faith, think that there is a fire, even if there isn't one, even if it was false, but you thought that there was a fire, again, you'd be warning people to try to get to safety. Maybe if you needed to get someone's attention quickly, like an active shooter situation, where you need to concisely...
Is that a thing that they did over here? When I was in the USA, they used to, like, when the kids were going through training at school, or I don't know if someone was trying to kidnap them or anything like that, they used to say, yell fire.
Oh, really?
I was never told that.
No.
I just wonder if it was a thing over here.
No.
Certainly not in my age group, anyway.
So, like, if you're in a bad situation, no, I'm talking about your kids or anything like that.
Yeah.
But if you're in a bad situation where, I don't know, you needed help quickly.
It's like a code word.
Shout a code word, yeah, to shout, because more people are likely to respond to someone shouting fire than they would help.
Ah, right.
Do you think that's the case, though?
Yeah.
Do you think more people would turn around and see what?
Yeah, because people are interested. If someone shouts help, you're not interested. Someone shouts there's a fire, you'd be like, where?
Yeah.
True. And they might be onto emergency services straight away as well, maybe. Whereas it's help, it's like...
Yeah, because it's more of a time thing, isn't it, with fire, where you can, like, the quicker you act on it, the less damage it has.
Yeah.
Whereas other situations, you might be able to sort of let it lie for
and if you're in the area, it's in your interest to do something about it as well, isn't it? So,
well, there's the more big, I guess, the more big curiosity of you're going to want to see a building that's on fire, but if someone's shouting help, then there might be I'm going to have to do something about this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so some people might just put their heads down and
don't
be like,
get involved.
Nope.
Exactly, yeah. But if it's fire and you're there, you're involved anyway.
I just remember someone telling me that was the thing. I wasn't sure if it was here or in America, where they said to get someone's attention.
I've never heard that.
Must be in the States, and I guess.
Convey that people need to get out of there very quickly. Maybe when you were telling a joke, if you're a comedian and it's a punchline to a joke, you can probably yell fire in a crowded theater. If the movie you're watching has fire in the title or fire on screen, or a script calls for an actor to yell fire. I mean, the number of situations where you could actually yell fire in a crowded theater probably drown out situations where you could not yell fire in a crowded theater. That magical phrase is judged by the exact same First Amendment standards that we use to judge every other kind of speech. So the question is, did you intend to cause panic in circumstances likely to cause a panic and injury? Well, if not, then you're probably in the clear. But that takes us to the second most pervasive free speech myth, which is that hate speech is not free speech. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that it absolutely is.
The woman was too stunned to speak.
Things that are hateful understandably make people uncomfortable, which is why even good actors like Lou Diamond Phillips have bad takes like this. Let's all please remember that hate speech is not free speech. It comes with a cost to real lives. Let's make kindness our default setting, which is a nice sentiment, but it's also extremely wrong. Hate speech is free speech, according to the Supreme Court. Oh, wait a minute, I'm getting a breaking news alert. According to the Supreme Court, even the Supreme Court has stated that hate speech is not protected speech. Well, I'm sorry, random Twitter guy, but the Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that the First Amendment protects even repugnant and hateful expressions. For example, the court ruled that the Westboro Baptist Church could protest at the funerals of dead soldiers carrying signs that say, "Thank God for dead soldiers," and that have homophobic slurs. Similarly, the court struck down a St. Paul...
Have we ever reacted to anything about Westboro Baptist Church?
No.
Don't think so.
There was a Louis Theroux episode on them years ago, and they're like absolute scumbags, just like you said, picketing dead soldiers' funerals and funerals of kids that have died.
I may have seen something like that with Louis Theroux, possibly.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, it's an interesting... I've listened to, obviously, having listened to loads of comedy podcasts, they talk about this whole free speech argument all the time because, people can get in trouble for jokes, and they all say the best way to combat bad speech is with better speech, not by shutting people down.
Yeah.
Because if you shut people down, they just go into dark rooms in little echo chambers and they say the same stuff to people who have the same beliefs, and then it becomes like a religion to them or a cult.
It goes two ways in this country with your free speech, because you've got people like Abu Hamza who stands on in Poets' Corner preaching all this kind of shite and hatred.
Yeah.
Right? And then if someone says something similar but isn't Abu Hamza and says it about Abu Hamza, then you get arrested.
Yeah. Is he still alive?
Yeah.
Is he in Guantanamo? Or is he free?
Is he out?
I don't know. I don't think he was extradited, was he?
No, I don't think he is. For some reason I thought he's out. Or am I thinking of someone else? Oh, Abu Hamza might be inside. Who's the one that's out? That's just a bigger
I'm not
pain in the
sure.
ass. I mean, he was some kind of like preacher of sort.
Right. But I'm not
Can't remember
sure.
his name.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I think the line is drawn when you're calling for acts of violence to be carried out and things like that. If you're just saying horrible things to people, it's not very nice. It's not a nice thing to do.
We do it at football. You say things, but you don't mean it.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to get your head kicked in, right? You're not going to kick someone's head in.
No.
You're just making threats as such.
Yeah.
But that's just what they sing. That's a singing thing that you go back and forth.
Yeah.
But there's certain things you can't say. It's not.
Yeah.
You know the comedian Isaac Butterfield,
Yeah.
the Australian one. He is going in front of the Australian Human Rights Commission at the moment because of a joke that he told on stage. And it's like, it's not even that offensive. It was just, he was joking about Aboriginal people, which are, I think, maybe a bit of a protected class in Australia because of the sketchy history they've had of how they've been treated. And someone complained to the Human Rights Commission, and he's got to go in front of a panel of them and explain the joke. And
It'd be interesting to see the breakdown of that, wouldn't it?
sets a very dangerous precedent.
Of course
doesn't
it does, yeah. Something like that does, yeah.
For a joke as well.
Gary Glitter up there next going, can you explain that why you call me that?
Soldiers, and that have homophobic slurs. Similarly, the court struck down a St. Paul ordinance that made it a crime to place a burning cross or swastika anywhere, quote, in an attempt to arouse anger or alarm on the basis of race, color, creed, or religion. The court also ruled that Nazis could march through the streets of Skokie, Illinois, a town where many Holocaust survivors lived. In other words, hate speech, as a part of free speech, is settled law that won't be overturned anytime soon. But if the concept of the First Amendment having no protections for hate speech isn't really a thing in American law, then why do so many people think that hate speech is illegal? Well, they might be looking at how European countries regulate speech. Those other countries generally don't have the same kind of First Amendment protections. And after the horrors of World War II, many European nations passed laws criminalizing speech that incites hatred or advocates genocide against certain groups. This is certainly a point of controversy in the United States, where many people wish that First Amendment protections did not attach to what they consider to be hate speech. And you might not like it, but in America, the solution to hate speech has traditionally been, in the words of Justice Louis Brandeis, quote, more speech, not enforced silence. And this might not please everyone, but it's certainly an easier principle to apply than an outright ban on hate speech. Why? Well, because it's really hard to define what constitutes hate speech. Certainly, President Ron DeSantis would define hate speech differently than President Elizabeth Warren. But at least for the time being, if you believe that the government should be able to regulate hate speech, I'm allowed to call you a stupid idiot. That takes us to the third myth, which involves the application of the First Amendment to private corporations. The free speech clause of the First Amendment prohibits, quote, the government from abridging the freedom of speech. It does not stop private people or private corporations from censoring speech. And by that same token, whenever people are complaining about Section 230 and the internet and protecting big corporations, almost 100% of the time, the thing that they are upset about is not Section 230, but rather the First Amendment itself. So, for example, if you call up a radio show and the host cuts you off and hangs up on you, your rights were not violated. You can't force the radio show to give you a platform. Similarly, if you post misinformation on Twitter and the company decides that your tweet violates their rules, they can ban your account. You can't force Twitter to give you a platform, despite how hard you are trying. Or if you post a comment on someone's food blog saying that no one should ever put pineapple on pizza, they have a right to delete your comment, even though it is absolutely correct. But again,
you're not allowed pineapple on pizza, but that's a different debate. So
I think you can have whatever you want on pizza.
You can. But is it the FCC that regulate what is allowed on TV and what's not allowed on TV? Mm-hmm. And are they a government organisation?
They will be, yeah.
So is there a watershed in the States where you can't say certain things until a certain time?
I'm not sure if there's a watershed as such like we have over here.
Because I'm thinking that would be the government essentially regulating speech, wouldn't it, if you're not allowed to say shit at 5 o'clock in the afternoon?
It's not regulating speech, it's just sort of like what's appropriate for the viewing audience, isn't it?
I think all programs should
that's
come
what it
with
is.
that message at the start saying there might be stuff in here that you don't like, so don't watch it.
To be honest, the amount of channels about now, there is stuff with swearing in at all times of the day now,
Yeah.
because
There
it
is, yeah.
repeats on whatever Dave and all the other satellite channels.
Yeah.
It is on all the time, but yeah, they need to put a warning before it. But I think, like your ITV, BBC, I think they'll stick to the 9 o'clock watershed where they don't put sort of like sketchy stuff on before that, I would guess, because in case kids are watching. But
Look at YouTube.
YouTube,
you don't have to be signed
exactly,
in to watch things that have got the word shit in it.
It's down to parents, isn't it? It
is, yeah.
At the end of the day, common sense.
Yeah.
You don't want your 6-year-old watching, certain programs.
I just think
Absolutely.
it's just getting more and more difficult. I'm glad my kids aren't sort of like that age now. Like, it's.
But again, some parents don't mind it. They just let them watch anything they want. It's like it's an education. They'll make their. I was allowed to watch anything I wanted.
Yeah, I pretty much did.
We used to rent videos after video guy. He used to come and open his boot, and then he'd have a secret compartment, and he'd get the VHS cassette out and go, "Do you want these?" And we was only about 11. And we'd take all kinds of shit in there, not just porno films, but like war films, people getting their head blown off and all kinds of stuff.
There was a guy in Hale that we all called Porn 69 guy, because he used to just sell porn. I don't know what the markup on it was for him, but he'd buy
His
it.
name Humphrey.
I don't know his name. I don't know his name. He was near. I won't say where because he may still live there. But either way,
It'd be interesting to find out who it is.
It's a bit different for me because television wasn't invented when I was a kid. So pass me by.
Mike had to listen to the Argers on the wireless.
Again, you can't force someone else to promote your speech. And the best way to think about this dichotomy is by considering public versus private schools. Public schools are an arm of the government. The Supreme Court has said that public school students, quote, do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech and expression at the schoolhouse gate. Students have a limited right to wear expressive clothing and hand out petitions as long as they don't disrupt the functioning of school. But private schools, on the other hand, do not give students those same rights because a private school isn't a state entity.
Cranbrook, that's a private school.
Many people believe this is very unfair, but in America, the First Amendment protects your expression from intrusion from the government, not from private corporations. When you're talking about private corporations, you always have the option to take your ball and go home, to leave a popular platform, and then create a platform where no one actually goes there. But at least you can express yourself. And while most people probably understand this, surely it must be the case that you cannot display profanity in public with abandon. Like this particular Twitter take, if you know someone who is displaying a flag or sign with profanity, you need to report it. It is against the law to have public profanity in the open, even on private property. Report them and have the police have it removed. If they refuse, file a lawsuit. Now, this particular bad legal take involves at least two common myths. One, you can't display profanity, and two, you can't desecrate the flag. Well, in a 1971 case, again involving the draft, the Supreme Court established that the government cannot criminalize the display of profane words in public places. In the case of Cohen versus California, Paul Cohen wore a jacket with the words "fuck the draft" into an LA courthouse. Police arrested him for disturbing the peace. Cohen was convicted and sentenced to 30 days in jail. An appeals court affirmed the conviction because it was foreseeable that wearing the jacket could cause a violent reaction. As you can see, in every era, the US government was really sensitive about people expressing their desire to avoid the draft. But a closely divided 5-4 Supreme Court reversed the conviction. Justice John Harlan, leading the majority, held that the phrase "fuck the draft" wasn't an obscenity, nor was it fighting words. It couldn't be an obscenity because the statement wasn't erotic, and it couldn't be fighting words because it was just a general statement, not one...
Unless the draft is a dancer at your local strip club.
Yeah. Like
coming up next, the draft.
Like a 11 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning stripper called Draft.
She just had a big what's it?
A big drafty
when
down
she
there.
opened up down the pole. And she used to spin around the pole so fast you get a bit of a draft. So she was known as the draft. I used to have a sweater, a t-shirt. I used to stay on the front.
Some of the things that go
draft.
around in your mind, really.
Directed at inciting imminent lawless action. California argued that public profanity invaded the interests of unwilling viewers, especially women and children. Justice Harlan memorably observed, though, that people who were offended by the jacket, quote, could effectively avoid further bombardment of their sensibilities by averting their eyes. And although some people hate profanity, quote, one man's vulgarity is another man's lyric. Justice Harlan also wrote, quote, the Constitution leaves matters of taste and style so largely to the individual. In other words, there's no legal reason you can't just come out and say, "F Joe Biden," rather than "let's go Brandon," you cowards. And at the same time, if you wanted to, you could desecrate the flag. Flag desecration includes everything from burning the American flag to putting it on a beer bottle. Congress has tried to ban flag desecration for decades, but the Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that you have a First Amendment right to hurt the flag. Though in the early 20th...
Isn't it funny how burning a flag is something that really riles everyone up?
Yeah.
Everybody.
You can do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's one of them things that just gets on everybody's case if you see your flag burning or see someone burning your flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it can make you more nationalistic just to
doesn't
see.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it goes on in I've seen it a lot in the Middle East when there's been trouble with United and the States and over there and burning flags.
Well, you only
and
have to
stuff like that.
slightest little thing and you see it, don't you? And all of a sudden, let's go live to Tripoli, and the next thing they're all stamping on the American flag for whatever's happened.
Yeah,
it's on fire.
Yeah, with an effigy. They've always got time to make an effigy of someone as well.
We've got time to get a job.
I think there's a comedian who talked about it. I can't remember who though. And they were saying, you burn as many flags as you want because we're just going to keep manufacturing flags and selling them to you. And it helps boost our economy.
Yeah.
In the century, the Supreme Court did uphold a number of flag desecration statutes. But by the 1960s, the court had reversed course. For example, when civil rights leader James Meredith was shot in Mississippi in 1966, Sidney Street took his own flag into the street in New York City and lit it on fire. Street, a black veteran of World War II, said, quote, "If they can do this to James Meredith, we don't need a flag." The city fined Street $100. Street filed a lawsuit and eventually it reached the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court reversed Street's conviction. It held that Street could not be punished for burning the flag. Then in 1974, the court reversed the conviction of a college student who put a peace sign on the flag. The state prosecuted the student under a law that made it illegal to improperly use the flag. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that this was symbolic speech that was protected by the First Amendment. And when the court reversed a flag-burning conviction in 1989, the Senate and President George H.W. Bush were outraged, and Congress enacted the Flag Protection Act. Protesters responded by immediately burning flags, and they were convicted under federal law. But the Supreme Court struck that law down in the United States versus Eichmann, holding that, quote, "If there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, it is that the government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea itself offensive or disagreeable." Though if you go out there and exercise your right to truthfully yell fire in a crowded theater or burn a bunch of flags in the street, you'll probably build up quite the appetite. And today's sponsor, Factor 75, can help with that. Because Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen diet.
I think that's it. It's an interesting topic, isn't it?
I think a lot of that is down to matter of opinion, like the profanity laws and stuff like that. As if people do find it offensive. With swear words, I probably won't find it offensive if someone had a T-shirt with.
But if some
something like that on it, I probably won't find it offensive particularly. But some people would.
But then, me having a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old kid, and if someone stood next to him saying, fuck everything and like blah blah, really bad language, I'm going to have a word with them. But you've got your right to say it, but I've also got my right to have a word with you when you're using it inappropriately.
Doesn't mean it's right or appropriate, but it doesn't mean
I thought you weren't allowed to use it in the UK.
What?
Profanity in public.
I'm not sure, because we don't have anything protecting free speech as such, do we? And there's loads of cases of people that have got in trouble for tweets and things, and actually there's people that have done jail time for posting things on social media. So our laws are very different.
Have you seen the new advert for Paddy Power?
No, I don't think so.
It's a social media police or something.
Right.
And they go around, they go, and they give like a Twitter name, It's something like Top Boxing Fan 69 or something. It says, "Are you Top Boxing Fan 69? And he goes, "Yeah." And he's answered the door, he's got his dressing gown on. And he says, in your tweet dated this time, he said, you tweeted that, what's his name that fought, got body blow and went down, Garcia. You said that Garcia taking a body blow, it wouldn't happen to you. And he's like, "Yeah." So up you come, Joe, and this guy gets off all dressed as a boxer, just walks up to him and just bang, smacks him in the stomach, he goes down. And he goes, right, and then he moves on to someone else, and he's reading Twitter, he goes to people's houses. Yeah. It's like, that's what he's advertising, be careful what you tweet, sort of thing.
It's a good idea.
Sounds like
quite funny.
Usually good Paddy Power,
quite funny.
You think about it, don't they?
I think people should be allowed to essentially say what they want, as long as they're not putting someone in danger, calling for acts of violence, actively doxing people, which is like giving out people's addresses online.
There's a time and a place for a lot of things like swearing.
That's what I was just going to say.
You go to a football match, you're going to get chanting and swearing and stuff like that. So before you go, So if you're offended by it, you just don't go to one. But
someone said to me, "You've got kids here in a pub." I'll be like, "Kids shouldn't be in a pub, mate." So it's one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If I was doing the school run and I stubbed my toe as I was getting out of the car, I'd probably go, bugger.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if I'm somewhere else, I'd be like, bollock, fuck.
Even bugger's just a bad word.
I say bugger.
Yeah, it's a bad word, that.
Is it?
Yeah, you know what it means, right?
I know what it means,
It's a bad word then if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the worst, It's probably one of the worst things you can say, to be honest, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose it
The terrible
depends.
father. Say that in front of your kids. You think, yeah.
Especially when you say "bugger me."
I don't say that. I just say bugger. Just say bugger. It could be directed at anyone.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I think it's important that people should be allowed to say mostly what they want, though. But then who decides what's too far?
Yeah, you just got to use a bit of common sense.
Common sense of who's around you, the environment you're in, and the location you're in, and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
But some people just, they've got too much to say, and they take it to the next level. And it's not just about having a conversation. I could be having a conversation with you three in a pub and use some profanity to express how I feel or what we're talking about, to give you a picture in your head about certain things. But then if I'm going to Hyde Park in London and walking past, I don't need to listen to some guy preaching about shit.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sort of thing.
I saw a video the other day that was it was one of these little clips on Instagram of someone, I think he was debating at a college or something, and there was a protest, and it was obviously to do with LGBTQ rights or whatever it is, and he called someone ma'am that was in the crowd, and she or he or they or what, they didn't have it written across their chest what they identify as, went absolutely mental at this guy. And said, "How dare you call me ma'am? That's hate speech." But then she started going, "You fucking bitch, that's hate speech." And I'm watching that and I'm like, surely calling someone a fucking bitch is hate speech as well.
Well, it is.
And it's like, people, that old thing of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I think people need to start getting on board with that again and stop being so offended.
The worst
by
thing
everything.
you've ever been called is ma'am.
I know, yeah.
You need to get out more.
Precisely. Yeah.
He's got a weekend out with you, don't they? That's what they need.
Anyway,
Some of the words I get people called, it's just bizarre, but ma'am is one of the things. By the end of it, you be just call me ma'am.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot worse, aren't there?
I give up.
Yeah.
Anyway,
nice one.
Yeah, thanks for that. Was that a Patreon request after all that? About an hour long.
It was indeed. Droid.
Cheers,
Yeah,
Droid.
Droid.
Yeah. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.